Hey, what's going on, everybody? Mark Aiello here. I am a documentary filmmaker who specializes in telling stories on those who live on the edge. I'm talking people who are involved in motorcycles, tattoos, blue-collar work like manufacturing and construction, you name it, fitness, anything that involves grit and edge, and lack of a better term is just badass, but at the same time has a good story. That's really what I highlight in my work. And with that said on story, I'm going to focus today's video on how to tell a good story. You know, people compliment me a lot on my storytelling skills and my ability to not just make a cool looking video for a brand or a business, but to know how to really tell a story. And I've come to learn that in my 3 years of building my portfolio and working on these types of pieces with these really interesting individuals, it really takes some, one would say talent, I would say it takes skill to really know how to just, at the end of the day, tell a good story. It sounds that simple, but I see on, whether it's on social media or YouTube, I'll see people that may have some good technical abilities in their work, but they don't really know how to tell a good story. And at the end of the day, I think that's what people want to see. What they want to hear is they want to be moved by an individual or some cause or calling. And from a business perspective, that's, I think, what people really care about as far as even just getting, getting people in the door to your business, whatever that may be, closing a deal. I think having a good, compelling story is the cornerstone of that, and it's what's going to have a human side to what it is that you do. And I recognized that from the beginning of building my portfolio is that people needed that. There was value for that. So I solely dedicated my abilities in business to storytelling. So this piece that I did, a little background for you, it was a year and a half ago. It was for my good friends at Dragon's Breath Forge, Jamie and Matt. Little claim to fame about this forge. Jamie Lindell is a blacksmith. He was on the show Forged in Fire on History Channel. He won that episode for his Roman gladiolus sword. But since then, he really has gained some notoriety and recognition all over the world. And now the forge is luckily at a point where they can have a really awesome business solely working on the types of swords and knives and other cool medieval shit that they want to make, particularly Damascus. So anyway, this particular project that I did with them, it was an interesting dynamic. Normally I'm doing content for businesses to help their marketing, make a nice company video or something for their sales, maybe short form content, that sort of thing for promoting themselves, whatever. But this was a corporate client who wanted a couple swords made. It was a gift for the CEO, I believe. And they just wanted to see a video on how the sword was made because these people were from across the country. They're spending thousands of dollars on a really awesome sword, but they wanted to see how it was made. So they're like, we'll throw in some money to hire a videographer to do it. And then Jamie was like, well, we have a videographer that we've worked with since the pandemic. You should give him a call. So that's how I landed this gig. It was pretty as simple as that. But I just felt, why not make something badass out of this? Why not make a cool movie out of this? I might as well use it as something that I would want to showcase for my portfolio, as well as obviously impressing the client and making something good for Jamie and Matt. So that's what I did. So we're going to dive into the storytelling techniques that I used through this video and that I pretty much use in all my work. And hopefully you'll get some value out of it. Hopefully it'll inspire you in your storytelling endeavors, depending on who you are, whether you're a filmmaker that is looking to improve your craft, or maybe you're a business and you want to understand the value of story for promoting your name. So let's get into that. So first things first, before we get into production, we need to identify the story. Now, it may seem like the story is simply just the making of a sword from A to Z, but we got to think a little deeper than that. What really is a sword at the end of the day? We got to ask these deep questions. What is a sword? What does it mean? What resembles a sword? What's beneath it? What's composed of it? Getting down to those points, really just beyond scratching the surface, really digging deep and thinking, what's really going on here? And so for me, in this case, I asked myself those questions, what is a sword? What's really composed of it? What goes into blacksmithing? What part of the human experience is involved in that? I wanted to kind of showcase the sword in a weird way as kind of like a human, like as a character, but paralleling that with Jamie and Matt as obviously as humans, as smiths, and really showing a deeper theme here, which that is, I would say the theme is growth, and the theme is birth and death. It's sort of like this interesting, very real truth to life, which is that as we start out from dust and we ideally manifest ourselves into the best being we can possibly be, and then eventually we die and we turn back to dust, and hopefully we leave something behind of significance or importance for the next generation. I really thought that was really the story that was going on here. And I wanted to highlight that through the sword being made as we're watching these smiths work so diligently and hard in making this amazing piece of art. So I start out in the beginning here in this sequence to kind of show a little ambiguity. I don't want to quite show the finished product yet of the sword, but I want to give the audience a little tease, a little hint as to what it looks like. As far as this lighting effect that's going on, it's literally, I did that myself. I'm just holding the camera, and the other hand, I'm waving a quasar light just above, like as I think maybe I was filming in this hand. I was holding the camera in this hand, waving the quasar light in this hand to give that wavy, kind of cool, atmospheric, dynamic effect. Super DIY, but I think it worked. I think it's really cool for an opening sequence here. Born of Iron, I thought that was a pretty appropriate title. Again, talking to that theme of birth and what is sword made of? It's made of iron, right? One of my biggest inspirations for doing this piece was Gladiator. Believe it or not, Gladiator is one of my favorite movies, and my favorite shot in cinema, of all cinema, is from the movie Gladiator, and it's that very beginning scene where Russell Crowe, you see his hand is, he's got the ring on it, and he's walking through the wheat fields. This really cool, very simple yet very sentimental shot, and I use that as inspiration here for this opening shot where we see Jamie's hands with the residue, I forget what you call it, the oxides, the oxides of the steel, the iron in his hand. I drew inspiration from Gladiator for that. And again, going with that theme of birth and life, this is where a sword is really born. It's from these little oxides of iron that are remaining on the ground from previous work of smithing from another project. And now this goes into work for another sword to be made. So this is where it all starts. I thought it would have been a really cool way to open up the story here and get this kind of moody sort of vibe to start out. And with Jamie's voiceover talking about that process of where iron really comes from and how we get it from the earth, and that work has been done. I always like getting these little vignettes of the person being interviewed before we see them. There's some history value here. I don't want to quite show any action shots yet. I'm trying to just go for some very obscure B-roll, just how I would word it, as ambiguous shots, not really knowing what we're seeing. But we're seeing steel, and we're seeing fire, we're seeing the signs of work. Now, going through interviews, when you sit down with somebody and interview them, it takes a while to really chop up and get the best audio bites, the best quotes, they say. And not only is it about compressing them, but sometimes it's about disorganizing them into the way that you see fit as a storyteller. So maybe not everything Jamie says here is sequential in the interview, but it's my job as a storyteller to dice up and figure out what's the flow here. I don't know if it's an art or a science. I'd like to think it's both. You can get artistic with it, but I really think it's more of a science. Getting, as far as editing, goes, getting that down. Particularly for the interviews, I really wanted to use like a long lens, I was using a Rokinon 85mm, which is one of my favorite lenses I have. Very cheap cinema lens, but I really like that long, that sort of compressed look you get from long lenses like that, and obviously having such a very shallow depth of field. It's really beautiful. So when we did this project, as far as filming goes, I really had to get predominantly start to finish of this sword being made. Pretty much we started with the raw materials of the sword, with getting the steel being cut, all the way into, measurements and then welding, getting that all done. And then, of course, going into the forge and capturing some B-roll there, which is pretty awesome. I like to get a little free-flowing with the camera movements, too. I prefer handheld, by the way. I hardly use a gimbal with documentaries, especially. Like I said, I prefer handheld because it's very, it adds to that very lively cinematic feel that you get when you watch a movie. And you can't quite get that on a gimbal. I think a gimbal is a little too robotic for that. This little money shot right here, Jamie did that a few times. I didn't even tell him to do that, but when he was on Forged in Fire, he said that they would always want him to do this pose. So I was like, all right, let's do it. I think it looks money. It's kind of a historic piece, more or less, and I wanted some music to hit that vibe, very Nordic kind of medieval type vibe, but not too, I don't know, too nerdy, I guess is the word I'm trying to say. I want it to be a little more movie, more cinematic, something you would hear maybe out of a soundtrack for, I don't know, maybe Lord of the Rings or something. I think that'd be cool. So I just went with that. I'm so glad, too, Jamie suggested we do night forging, because I didn't really realize he was much of a night owl, but when he said he wanted to do night forging, I'm like, fuck yeah, I want to do night forging. That's gonna make this look 1,000 times better. Let's do the night forging. That's money. Yeah, this was just so cool. It was so much fun. It's one of my favorite projects to this day, looking back. I always like to do my editing based on, not visuals, but based on sound. Whether it's the music or some sound effect going on in the video, like in this case, the hammer. I think it's always better to do the editing based off of that. Based off of what you're hearing, not what you're seeing. Yeah, now we're moving on to Matt, and his process on how he makes handles. One thing I look back on that I kind of wish I did a little differently was, I think I had a little too much jumpy, flashy shots. Some of it works, some of it might not. It might be a little too jarring, and maybe it would have been better if I just let the shots just play out. But you live and learn, and that's something I think I want to try out more going forward. It was really cool interviewing Matt because he was very charismatic and very just interesting in how he worded things. If you're a filmmaker, you'll find that when you interview people for shoots, you'll find some people are a little camera shy, a little nervous, like me, who don't maybe quite know what to say or how to word it. And then other times you'll find people that are just very charismatic and will just go on a whim, on a roll, and there's not much coaching you have to do with them. Little note on how to get good interviews for a piece of any film of that matter. I think a lot of filmmakers struggle in, getting the right moments out of a subject that they're interviewing. And really what it comes down to is just, not asking, generic questions. Maybe don't get quite into specifics. Maybe you can if it's a certain topic being addressed. You really got to challenge your subjects sometimes. Challenge them to think deeply and creatively on big ideas and big concepts. Why do you do this? What keeps you going? What motivates you? What really is a sword? What is iron? And they'll get the idea that you want them to come up with creative and interesting answers in a way that it's not so contrived. I kind of wish I found a different setup for Matt to be interviewed. I had kind of rushed. I didn't really have all my equipment with me, so I had to just rely on practical lighting. I mean, I guess it still works, but it's not ideal. It's a really cool design for the handle, let alone the entire sword. That's how big this project was. They had to delegate, not just making the blade, but entire craft to making the handle, which takes a long time. This process is pretty cool. Yeah, I really enjoy throwing in music swells here and there, and especially if it's a amped up kind of energetic music. Back to what I said earlier, you know, edit to the music and making a cool cut up sequences after that. Another note on interviews too, you know, take your time. There's no rush. Don't make your subject feel rushed. You know, take the time, have a conversation with them at the end of the day. It's not a job interview. You're not asking them question after question like on a list, like going robotic. I mean, you have notes. That helps. I make notes. But, you know, frame it more as a conversation. You want them to open up about the experience. That's what makes a good interview. You know, I'm no Dan Rather, but I'm just saying, that's how it's done. Yeah, now that we're getting to the climax, I guess you would say, let's amp this up a bit. Let's get the audience, let's give a kick in the ass in the audience. Now again, back to what I said, the story being really about birth and death and about life and living the best existence you can possibly be. I think Matt really sells it here at his final quote. It's like a chef's kiss. I think that really drives home the theme of the story.
If you stop getting better, well, hopefully it's because you died.
And again, badass music, because why not? Kick the audience in the face. Oh, and because we love fire. Who doesn't love fire? Fucking heat treatment. I was so worried about my camera getting, like, burnt or whatever. I mean, even earlier in this project, you know, the welding thing, I was trying to stand back a little bit because I didn't want sparks hitting the lens or anything. But I was a little scared doing this fire thing. Now, me personally, I'll jump right in the fire at anything. I don't care. I have no real common sense when it comes to things like that. But when I'm holding my camera, I'm very protective of that, like it's my baby. So I got a little scared when we had to do the heat treatment here. Luckily, Jamie had told me, you know, he gave me good caution. He was very cautious to me about, you know, here's where you want to be, where you don't want to be. You get this close, you'll get a little fire on you. So that was good to know. I kind of wish I got a different angle. I mean, yeah, the close-up of the fire, of that combust, I guess, is cool. But maybe a wide shot with, you know, seeing Jamie's full body standing there with the fire exploding. I feel like that would have been a little better. So I kind of wish I got that differently. This is actually, I think, one of the only parts of the documentary where when it came to B-roll, I set up lighting differently. I wasn't relying on practicals or anything like that. So I basically just cast the quasar light I had overhead on Jamie to give this kind of moody, dynamic, intense vibe here while he's observing and admiring this sword that he had just crafted. That shot is like, I'm pretty sure it's the thumbnail of the video here on YouTube and Vimeo. And it's just so cool. I use it for promoting my name and my work all the time. But he did it, though. Jamie made that. I didn't tell him to make that pose. He did. Maybe I did tell him, actually. I can't quite remember. Sometimes Smith will do that as a way of looking at the patterns in the sword. I really wanted to do this. When the sword was complete, I said, let's go out in a field. This is actually right outside Matt's shed where he was doing his work. And I said, let's do something really cool here with the grass. And I'm like, Jamie, I want you to raise this sword up in the sky. I want you to raise it. Just was like the final perfect shot. It's wonderful. I kind of wish I got a little wider because I wanted to see the whole sword in frame, but you couldn't quite see that. Just a little detail I'm crazy about. So that's more or less my walkthrough through the film. There's really a lot of work primarily in the editing. Maybe that's a whole other video in and of itself, which is showing you my editing breakdown. It's a weird combination of planning and being methodical, because I consider myself more or less a methodical person, but a lot of it too, it's a combination of being methodical and also being spontaneous on the spot and, you know, having little ideas, you know, spur of the moment to try out and, you know, taking some risks, maybe making little failures along the way, but it's all part of growth in the craft of storytelling, I think, is taking those chances, taking those risks. Ultimately, that's how you're going to tell a great story and how you're going to get better on your craft. There's an old saying which is simply put, write what you know. And I think as a storyteller, the more I know, the more I can write really interesting, really cool stories. And ultimately, as a filmmaker, that's what I strive to do in life, is get to know different people, different types of people, and different craftsmanship, different patterns of work, different lifestyles. And I think the more I do that, the more I can tell these interesting stories and get better at them. And I'm going to continue to make mistakes and fail along the way, but I won't let you down in my mission to be the best filmmaker that I can be. So hopefully that gives some value to you guys, whether you're filmmakers or you're other creatives of some other type of role or industry or craft, or maybe you're a brand that's interested in knowing the importance of story and why it's so central to have to your brand nowadays. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the content here, please subscribe to my channel and please give this video a like or a comment, and I'll see you all in the next one. Take care. God bless.